welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 242 for Monday, April 24th, 2023. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Johnny, but as you may know him on the internet, Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and we've been having a lively conversation in the render distance this week, which is the extended version of the podcast. You can get that if you're a patron of the show at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, and you can learn about my opinions on the Dungeons & Dragons movie, other movies and shows that we've been interested in watching lately, and Joel's experience with Dutch babies. Trust me, it's not as weird as it sounds. Once again, that's patreon.com/thespawnchunks to get an extra 15 minutes or so pre-show and an extra 10 minutes or so post-show with your Spawn Chunks every week. You also get access to our patron events. We had our monthly Minecraft Hangout this past Saturday, April 22nd, which is going to be published later today on the Patreon page. If you didn't get to hang out with us live, that's going to show up before the main podcast does. So by the time you're listening to this, it should be out there for everybody who's a patron to listen to.
So what have you been up to in Minecraft this week, my friend?
Well, my week has been all going into castle building. All my Empire's effort, creative mode play, and survival play has all been working towards what I'm now regularly referring to as Castle Grayscale, which I thought was a pretty great sort of pun on the fact that, yes, it's mainly in like a grey and black palette, and grey scale kind of imagines, you know, the draconic references, maybe kind of sounds a little bit Game of Thronesy. I hadn't even thought that it's also a pun on Castle Grayskull until somebody pointed that out to me, and I went, that's just perfect now. Yeah, it just has to be that. So, yeah, I've been working on this castle design and building it bit by bit. I've obviously had the blueprint, I've shared images of that before, and I only have the one screenshot to share today for the show notes, but the entrance now has 2 towers flanking on either side. It has 2 towers behind the main gatehouse, a lot of sections connected by walls, and then 2 outer towers, which are more of a skewed rectangle shape instead of being round towers. So I'm really starting to work in some of the architectural style that I'm trying to get from something that isn't just a round tower with matriculations and arches and stuff around the outside, the ornaments on the top. I'm working with more like hip roofs and that kind of thing. So a little bit architecturally diverse starting to creep in here instead of it all just being stone towers with stone tops. And I haven't got to the point where I'm adding in turrets and minarets and stuff yet, but we'll see how we get on as we progress through the rest of the structure. This all leads through to a courtyard, which I'm now in the process of working on, but that's still in the early days, so more on that when I have more to share. But I'm planning on building kind of a stockade inside of there, as though the castle has had a bunch of defenses put up against people invading at some stage, but the exact outcome of that invasion has yet to be played out as far as what I want to show in terms of building it. So really, I'm just working on a bunch of stuff that I can put together with an easy, accessible set of materials, which is why a lot of it's stone and deep slate and the kind of stuff that I've been dragging out of the ground and putting in my storage system all season long.
Dude, this looks fantastic. And again, we talked last week about the scale, the diameter of these towers, but then I'm also curious about the depth of the walls, because I know you've got at least a block or 2 of depth happening as the walls go up, they go in, then they come back out again before you reach the top and the battlements and stuff. So how thick are your walls in general?
In general, if it's like the perimeter wall, I've left a 3-block gap inside of it. But then when it comes to the towers themselves, I'm building straight up and then adding onto the outside more often than I am like sculpting it inwards and then back outwards again. So a lot of the time, if I put up a flat wall, I'm augmenting that in front of it, and I've left myself enough space on this plateau around the outside so that I can put a bunch of supports and buttresses and rubble from the towers and stuff like that, and it can all sort of spill out forwards instead of pushing things backwards to create depth. I'm more pulling the rest of it out, and so that's left me a lot of leeway even when I wasn't planning to have a 3-block thick wall for the entire circumference of a tower. And so that's worked out pretty well so far. The other thing I want to point out, we've been talking about this in the past with how to do the scale of certain builds, and the fact that when you build roofs, you always want to build them with stairs and slabs and things that add a little bit more texture and make the roof feel more of like a slope. And I've been playing on such a large scale with these builds that it's been easier for me to incorporate full blocks into roof designs.
Right.
And this was a really great example. For the rectagonal rectagonal, octagonal, rectangular towers. I'm inventing words to try and figure out what on earth I'm doing here. For the square ones, what I did, because they're an angled build, because the walls
Right.
effectively are built in 3-block chunks, and then it goes back a block and another 3-block, and then back a block and then another, and it does that all the way round. So you end up with an angle that's not like quite a 45-degree angle. It's more of just like a kind of a gradual angle, maybe like 20 degrees or so, and that works out really well until you get to the roof, especially if you want to do anything with more detailed blocks, because suddenly you've got stairs that are going to connect at weird angles, and you have to remember to do it with symmetry for the opposite side, and like where things are going to connect up and where you put the slabs and stuff. I find that stuff becomes really messy really quickly. And even building with full blocks, I thought for a second, how on earth am I going to do all of this? Because it has to come in 3-block sections, but where do those slope towards? Do I do kind of like a gable end to it? But that's going to look kind of weird because it's split up into these 3 separate wall sections, and any roof is going to start either overhanging stuff weirdly, or it's just not going to work out. But eventually what I ended up doing was just continuing to build 3 blocks up from each of the adjoining roof sections and build up towards a central point, but do that consistently all the way around in layers. And eventually the roof kind of shaped itself without really needing to worry so much about where it was going to connect. I just let it connect where it was about to naturally, and then just kept going around. And from every angle of this, it looks so satisfying. And I thought, I've been worrying so much, and like I always psych myself out when it comes to roof design. These just came together so immediately that I just thought, wow, okay, I'm glad I didn't do that in survival. I was building all of this in creative first, and I feel like I saved myself a whole lot of time by doing that.
Nice. I really enjoy that trick of like taking something and instead of trying to make it on a specific angle, it's like it's not an isometric kind of cheat, but it's a way of like instead of rotating the ends of a build, you're kind of skewing something as opposed to properly rotating. Because we
Yeah.
all know what a 45-degree building in Minecraft looks like. Everything's all the blocks are kind of like on an angle, including your ends of your rectangle. But what you've done is just kind of like nudged it back by a block each time, and it's the same. We'll call it like a slice, like a 3D printed slice of the build, which makes it easier to build and easier to attach to things. But man, talk about a successful way of doing it. It looks fantastic. And I'm seeing like you've got iron bars, looks like across the top of everything. And the level of detail for me, especially on the big towers, but also within like the walls that you've got too, is like you've got enough depth that you're able to put in details with full stair blocks and full blocks, or full slabs. So it comes out, there's a bunch of cool stairs that are like either back to back or upside down, or like creating little like cross shapes in the negative space between them, or fleur-de-lis, depending on, how you're seeing it. Like that kind of level of detail is something that you can only achieve when you've got a tower that's 15 or 18 or whatever wide. And then you've also got the chunkiness of everything is kind of consistent throughout, which just is really looking great, man. I can't wait to see more of it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm hoping that I'll get more of it built this week, and I'll have a lot more to show people next week's show. But I'll also include the footprint, the sort of original layout of the castle, so that people can kind of see where this is coming in. It's on the left-hand side of the picture where I've got a bunch of rounded towers laid out, and then the footprints of the rectangular towers are a little bit more visible there. So now I'm working on the large courtyard space behind that has some walls that lead into a main entrance hall, and I'm designing the gateway for that, and then where that's going to lead to, and probably work on some interior stuff when I get bored of building exteriors. But so far my focus on this project has been pretty good, and having, again, been taking a lot of inspiration from Elden Ring, I think I've got enough experience with that environment lately that I can go in, start building stuff, look up a couple of reference images, but more or less know what I'm doing, and the layout starts to come naturally to me, which is in that flow state that I've been trying to achieve for this long with projects like this. I think I'm finally there, so looking forward to doing a lot more work on it this week.
It's really good when you hit that stage of, one, Minecraft lends itself to kind of medieval building with all the stone and wood. But then once you've realized, you've got your block palette, you've got your standard wall depth, we'll call it, you've got your like little palette of decorations that you know how to do, or that you know you want to echo throughout the build, and then things just start to flow a lot more organically. You know, you build two towers, and then connecting them with a wall, you have to you want to do something artistically, but you're not necessarily worrying about the technical stuff, right? Like once you've worked out how to connect a wall and a tower technically the first time, you can kind of like repeat that and kind of like tackle little challenges as they come without having to like plan the whole thing in creative, and having that flow. That's what I got into, and why the bridge project that I'm on in West Hill is so long lived, is because I got down the rabbit hole of like, ooh, if I just connect this to this thing, and then all of a sudden you're building like bridges and towers and roofs, and nothing was previously planned. The bridge was just supposed to be a bridge. It didn't have towers when I was first designing it. So it's funny how that kind of stuff just kind of like creeps into it. But it's fun when you can lean into it, like when you've got the time and you know it's working out the way that you want visually, when you have that creative bug and you can just kind of like put the pedal to the floor and just go for it, right?
Yeah, that's the state I'm in right now, thankfully, and hoping it continues. So this is the same bridge you were talking about last week, then, the one with those, going up a ridge effectively on one side of the town. How's that going?
So I've decided to simplify my approach quite a bit. What I did was I was trying to create an angle on the wall that connected to the curtain wall. So the problem that I ran into was basically the curtain wall was designed and built. This bridge was then added later. And when I decided to add towers to the bridge and I really liked it, it looked really silly that the tower for the bridge and the tower for the curtain wall were so close together and not connected. It looked kind of like an odd choice. So I thought, well, I have to make this look more intentional. I have to make it look like it's connected. And so the solution was to take the brown roofs that you see on all of my towers that dot along the curtain wall and apply those to the bridge. So the bridge complex at the top got a lot bigger, but it now sort of serves like a gatehouse. There's no official like door that comes down, but there's two towers on either side of the entrance to this bridge coming down into the valley, which makes it feel very protected. It makes it feel like you're passing into an area. Like when you come through this bridge, you are in West Hill, that kind of idea. And then everything west is just a road that kind of goes over the hills. And so the solution was to straighten up the wall. It was to take an older tower that I had already completed and basically cut the top off it and raise it by like 6 blocks. Like I made it a lot taller, and that made the angle of the wall that kind of goes down to connect to the curtain wall feel a lot grander. It felt a lot taller, and it provided more connections inside. And true to the other things that I've been doing, you can now walk from the inside of the curtain wall across the pedway, up a tower, and across this wall. The only thing that I've not done, which I've not done on purpose, is that from the bridge, from the gate to the bridge, you cannot get up to the curtain wall. So the idea is that like there's no hole in the defense, because then like access to the entire town would be like one wooden door. And you could go and get your whole way in. So you can get up to the towers of the bridge that are connected to the bridge, but then there's another tower that has only access from the curtain wall. And so it's kind of a fun Easter egg for anybody that explores the town and decides to walk across all my different pedways and realize, wow, I can get all the way to the bridge from here. And there's no way down. Like you're in a tower looking out through windows, but it's kind of a fun thing to kind of lay in there. But that allowed me, once those decisions were in, like everything else kind of came quite quickly, because I've already got a design, pattern for the insides of these towers, the rafters, the supports, where the lanterns go. So I didn't have to like think too much about that. It was basically just like filling in a coloring book once the outsides were done. And I added another tower on, I guess it would be the north side. So I copied it over. I already knew the textures, the blocks. So like these kind of things took like, a couple of minutes, like half an hour, that kind of thing. And then everything went back to a grinding halt. Because I'm realizing that the cliffs, what was missing, and the problem that I'm having is that I'm trying to decide how to decorate and put some detail work in the profile of the bridge, which is a very big mass of stone brick right now. It will eventually get like mossy and cracked and stuff like that, but I cannot decide for the life of me how to detail it. So I thought, well, what I should really do, one, to save myself some time, and also to bookend this, is the deck of the bridge is done. That's all textured. That was an easy task. I'm now working on the cliffs, the custom cliffs on the outside of it, which involve adding like some deep slate. I'm experimenting with that to have the bridge stand out better. I'm actually adding like little bits of grass that have like bushes and vines hanging over the edge, like all that kind of stuff. Because if I finish that part with the deck done and the foliage done, then really I'll have like a sliver of the bridge where I'm like, okay, now this is what I have left to work with. What is going to be the best way to decorate this bridge that's not going to interfere with what I have down below? I'm still struggling with block choices. And as much as I like the experience of walking up the bridge deck, the choice to make it all slabs means it's really difficult to have like a nice clean line going up the outside of the bridge. So I'm actually looking again at the screenshot that you shared of your castle grayscale, because of the different ways that you're using stairs, like upside down or sideways to try and get some inlays. I experimented with that a little bit on my bridge, and it didn't work out quite the way that I wanted, but I need to take another crack at it and maybe steal some techniques from you, because I feel like that is what it needs. It needs some sort of relief. It needs some sort of like depth change, and it's big enough and beefy enough that I can do it. Because underneath of it, it's just completely. It's either got an arch over the river, or underneath the main part that's on the cliff, it's just solid. So I've got lots of room for depth should I decide to add some. The only thing that I've managed to add is just a couple of drain holes where it would look like any water on the deck would kind of run off and drip down into the river. But so it's coming along. I've done 7 streams now, and I call them like, the bridge part 7 or whatever, but really like I'm now on to like custom cliffs. And I mean, you and I both know how long that takes. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's rewarding, but it's just like, it's your whole stream. It's 2 hours or 3 hours of like flying in, making some changes, flying away, looking back. Does it look good? Yes, no, rinse and repeat. And it's doable. I did find that I've kind of gone back to using ender pearls right now because it's a lot easier to travel short distances than when the rocket is too much to get you over the river. Like, you just throwing an ender pearl is usually the easiest thing. So I'm glad that we have an enderman farm now. So like when I run into those things, I can just go get like another few dozen and I'll be good. But it's coming together. It's one of those things that I really like it. I really like the view of it, but it's just kind of like delayed the, finishing touches on West Hill because like I really want this to be something that's finished and looks good because it's outside of the town. It's at the front of the town. So like, it's going to be a big part of your experience of West Hill. So I'm basically just kind of realizing I have to slow down, don't rush it, take my time, try not to get frustrated, and just like make sure that this is finished and looks good. But it's getting there. It's a slow process.
Yeah, for sure. It's so funny to me that somehow both of us have been talking about these projects for a while, but now we're both kind of building medieval at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I've ever considered necessarily what I was doing on Empires until I just started building a big castle and was like, well, there's no way around it now. We're both kind of building these stone monstrosities for better or for worse. But no, I think it's looking good. I think, like a couple of the things you've been considering doing with the bridge, definitely go for it. And honestly, just a little bit of depth can solve a lot of problems, even when you're building with one material. It really comes down to the shape of things more so than the texture of things with some of those. And that's the approach I took when I was building the museum build that's on Empires now that I copied in my survival guide world. It's all about getting the shape right, and then whatever you do texture-wise is just kind of icing on the cake at that stage.
And I think the thing for me is that I'm working on a much smaller scale. So I've got some limitations in that way. And it's on purpose because I didn't want this build to take 5 years. Instead, I've only wanted it to take 2.5. Because if I was building, I can't imagine, like if I was building the town scale at the same scale that you're building just your castle, right? Like it would be just massive. Like each tower would take weeks to complete. Because I only play live on stream. Like I don't play off camera.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So the challenge, it's funny too, like to see the different styles that you and I have come up with, both building medieval, but you obviously being inspired by I'm blanking on the game.
Elden Ring.
Elden Ring.
Yeah.
And then me mostly taking inspiration from like Lego or like miniatures, like tabletop miniature castles and things like that people build. And how simple they are. And so a lot of my stuff tends to be very straight and very simple. I'm a bit of a minimalist anyway when it comes to design. So I'm glad I went that road because otherwise this stuff would take me forever. But when I do get a chance to flex, my scale with this bridge, or now eventually with the keep, I mean, I'm looking at what you're doing and thinking like, okay, there's a couple of towers on this keep, and I think I'm gonna like double the diameter of them just to give myself some room to really make it feel important. Because I think that's something that you've done really well with Castle Grayscale is that I mean, yes, there's all this wonderful depth and detail and stuff like that, but the scale of it and what you're achieving with it, like it immediately in the landscape feels important
Hmm.
compared to everything else. And I think that that's what I want to try to do with my keep is that when I get there is I want to make sure that yes, the town looks cool, but holy smokes, is there a centerpiece? Like that's kind
Sure,
of what I
yeah.
want to get there. So we'll get there eventually, but it's fun. Like for folks that either haven't yet or have been resisted because everybody does it, the whole medieval style thing. If you want kind of a nice way to hit that flow, I mean, Minecraft really lends itself to it.
It really does. The fact that we can both build in two different medieval styles or like
Yeah.
kind of approach it from two different angles is really quite something. And there'll be more room to do that when 1.20 comes out because there's all kinds of interesting new features that are going to come along that I'm sure will enhance medieval builds and all kinds of other things besides. This week we had a snapshot, so we might as well just get into the news now.
Speaking of changes, yeah, Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 23W16A came out last week. In this week's snapshot, we're bringing you tweaks in the Trails ruins, new command functionality, and new advancement triggers, and more. Changes in 23W16A. All pottery shards have been renamed to pottery sherds, Sherds. If a vibration is scheduled to be received by a skulk sensor or skulk shrieker, they will stay queued until an adjacent chunk is loaded and is ticking. This prevents vibration resonance setups from breaking when unloading their chunks from a distance. The game's application icon has been updated. The icon will be a grass block in release versions and a dirt block in snapshot versions. Sniffers can now be tempted by torch flower seeds, so if you hold one, they will follow you around. Trail ruins have seen some changes. Trail ruin structures have been reworked based on community feedback with more structure variants. Sand no longer generates within the trail ruin structures. The amount of gravel and dirt in trail ruins have been tweaked. The amount of suspicious gravel has also been tweaked. The loot tables for suspicious gravel within trail ruins has been split. There is now a dedicated loot table for rare loot items, pottery sherds, and smithing templates, and a dedicated loot table for more common loot, like tinted glass panes, tools, candles, etc. When exploring trail ruin structures in a previous snapshot world in the new snapshot, an error might be shown indicating that a trail ruin is missing part of its new structure. Technical changes in 23W16A. The data pack version is now 14, accounting for item display orientation changes. Under commands, added a return command. The return command can be used to control execution flow inside functions and change their return value. Under advancements, the recipe crafted advancement trigger has been added. This triggers when crafting a recipe. Under tags, the villager plantable seeds is there to represent which kind of seeds villagers can farm, and maintains farmland has been added to represent which blocks will not cause farmland to be converted back into dirt when placed on top of it. Under display entity rendering changes, item display has been rotated 180 degrees around the y-axis to better match transformation applied when rendering items on the armor stand head and in item frames. For a more in-depth explanation on the new commands, triggers, and tags, visit the Minecraft.net article linked in our show notes.
The other major news, of course, is the launch of Minecraft Legends. There's a Minecraft.net article, Minecraft Legends is here, which we'll have linked in our show notes. It launched on April 18th, which was last Tuesday, and is available now on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and 5, Steam, Windows 10 and 11, PC Game Pass, Xbox Game Pass, Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, and Xbox Cloud Gaming. We're going to be dedicating most of the main discussion for this episode to our thoughts on the full release of Minecraft Legends, but for now we can talk a little about the snapshot.
So something that I thought was interesting was villagers being able to plant and farm ancient seeds is an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's not something that's an official feature as of this snapshot, but it's something you could do with that villager plantable seeds tag, right? So you could effectively data pack it in that they can plant torch flowers and pitcher pods.
Oh, I thought that was part of it. I thought
Is it not? Have I missed something back in there?
I could be misunderstanding it as well. The way that these things are worded is not always the best. I between this and a couple of videos that I watch, I thought that villagers could plant those seeds. I don't know whether they can pick them up, but I think they could plant them. I If they can plant them, just kind of going with that premise, whether it's a data pack or not, that could be really interesting because then you could have sniffers like digging up the seeds, and if you can find a way to harvest those seeds, maybe with like a minecart hopper underneath the block, and distribute them to villagers, if they would then plant them, then you wouldn't have to be there to pick up the sniffer seeds. You could just let villagers plant them, and then all you'd have to do is return to your planted ground and harvest the pitcher plants or the torch flowers, depending on what seeds they've been digging up.
And it depends whether villagers would then pick up the torch flowers or pitcher pods afterwards, because they do that for food crops, but they don't necessarily have any decorative crops with which to do that. So it's whether or not the villagers would like take any dropped flowers and put them in their inventories, or if they just leave them on the ground to collect automatically again. There's some interesting potential for automation there, which I quite like. Also really happy about the sherds change, just because I know we have a couple of archaeologists in our community, Archaeoplays, who's been on the show before, among them, who are incredibly happy that sherds, which is the term that I understand is used for pottery fragments, when shards is much more commonly used for glass objects. So the distinction between those two is really important in the archaeology field, and the changes is welcomed by the archaeology community on that score.
I agree. And from, a Minecraft education space, like I've seen, Minecraft used for, exercises in classrooms for young students where they're exploring pyramids and stuff like that. And now to have, pottery sherds with the correct term, I think that lines up with a lot of uses in that case. I am surprised so far this episode I have not misspoken and called them shards, because in the
you're doing very well.
In the common tongue, pottery shards make sense to me, right? But I'm not an archaeologist, so I appreciate that there's a new term we have to leave. It's the same with, I was talking about this on stream on the weekend, it's the same with propagules. Like, you could have easily just called them mangrove saplings and everybody would have known what you meant. But because they're propagules, and because it's a funny word, so it's easy to remember because it's a weird word, that because of that, you kind of have to like learn a new thing. And it's one of those things where like, that there's a lot of maybe arborists or naturalists out there that would have been like, wagging their finger at Mojang going like, nay, they're not saplings, please call them what they are. And to a point, like, there's always that fine line of like, do you want to call it what it's actually called? In this case, it's a small change. But, or do you want to call it something where the general populace is going to like understand what it is from a gameplay mechanic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In Archaeoplays' video, when the archaeology features were first added in Snapshot form, they were saying that working with kids, like for, museum groups and stuff who would come around and talking about candles, they would say, where do you think people get wax from candles? And before Minecraft introduced bees, they would say earwax a lot of the time, because that's like the type of wax that they interact with most on a daily basis.
Gross.
But since Minecraft added bees, and bees honeycomb, while not strictly speaking wax in the gameplay sense, or at least in the game's terminology, since that has been used to make candles, now they always answer bees, because Minecraft has taught them that's where the wax from candles comes from a lot of the time. So there's genuinely examples out there of Minecraft being a formative part of kids' education on certain topics that are represented within the game. And yeah, I think that's a really important thing for them to get the terminology right, so that when they get into a closer study of things like archaeology, they can be provided with a good foundation from which to work. And I can imagine a bunch of archaeologists not only being happy that the terminology is in the game, but that kids will be learning this and will be taking this terminology to their, field trips and museum visits and all that kind of stuff, and know what the correct terminology is from the get-go. I think that's really cool. So yeah, hats off to them just for making that very minor, like, single letter change that's just got all of the archaeology community celebrating.
The other stuff that I thought was interesting was definitely again in line with data packs was the idea of like what blocks maintain farmland, and if it's a tag, then it's something that can be potentially changed by a data pack, which we were reinformed of via email a week or two ago, and it's as 1.20 approaches, I'm reevaluating what data packs I have, what data packs I might want to use, to make some more sense out of some things that are coming down the line. And the idea of being able to change which blocks turn farmland back into dirt. Maybe you want to plant grass on farmland and then that will prevent it from turning back into dirt. So you can have like a different kind of texture underneath different flowers and stuff, or things in your area. I don't know. I have not tried it, but I imagine if you did that, grass would look like it was kind of floating above the farmland because of that pixel difference that the farmland has in depth.
Hmm.
But then, if the data pack also allows you to kind of nudge that down below, then, it could look really, really good. And for the folks that want to have that creative liberty, feeling like, that doesn't really break the game experience for them. It's just like a different way to have things on farmland. It would make sense that grass could grow up through farmland if you wanted it to. Then it opens up, some new, landscaping possibilities with a simple data pack. And I have it on my bucket list to kind of learn how to actually make data packs rather than just relying on other people making them and then relying on those also being updated when Minecraft updates. So I'm curious to see what there might be out there to like smooth over the quality of life experience when things very often I find, with Mojang making changes, they get like 80 or 90% of the way there. And there's a good chunk of the community that goes, oh, you almost had it. If we could just push it that little bit more. And that I think is where data packs can kind of come in and save the day.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about maintaining farmland, just think about anything that you would substitute in to look like a sprinkler or a more modern irrigation system, as opposed to just having a cubic meter of water in the middle of your farmland. And suddenly you've got a lot more like modern farming potential there. You could just say like, a cobblestone wall, for example. If you want to put one of those in the center and maybe attach like tripwire hooks or something to the outside of it to make it look like it's got a four-way sprinkler, then you could make your farm look a bit more like Stardew Valley and a little bit less like Minecraft. I think you could do a lot more interesting stuff with that just by tweaking things a little bit and understanding your own rules for how farmland stays hydrated and stuff. I think it's good.
Moving on into email this week. If you would like to email the show, send it to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please use that email address. Try to keep them brief if you can. And if you're on topic, then you might make it on the show.
This first one comes in from Elkhorn95, who's a landscape artist member of our Discord and has been one of our supporters for a very long time. So thank you so much for emailing in. The subject is dot updates and the flattening. Hi, Johnny and Joel. Set your Wayback Machine to 1.13, the update Aquatic, and recall the flattening, a major change to the underlying code that changed IDs from numbers to descriptors and eliminated character limits, allowing for longer block names and expanding the potential block inventory. We saw an immediate impact with the addition of prismarine slabs and stairs, a taste of things to come in 1.14 when we got slabs, stairs and walls for a whole host of existing blocks with a few glaring exceptions, looking at you cracked stone brick slabs and stairs and you quartz walls. Since then, we've gotten new blocks like Blackstone with the full array of sub-blocks and even a new tile block variant for Deep Slate. Some of the older blocks are still lacking those sub-block variants, and other new blocks that could use them aren't given them: tuff, calcite, concrete, etc. With the update cycle change of smaller bug fixing updates like 119.2.3.4, wouldn't those be a great place to start adding these sub-blocks in? Instead of just bug fixes or quality of life updates, Mojang could fill out missing block variants. Here's a bunch of bug fixes and hey, quartz walls. Mighty curious to hear your thoughts on the concept. Elkhorn95 was blown up by a creeper trying to crack stone brick slabs and stairs.
I had actually thrown in a mighty earlier on in Elkhorn's name, but then realized that that he did it later on his own. So I didn't want to double down on the mighty reference. So you have to swing by my streams for people to know what that means. I think this makes a lot of sense. I think that the dot releases are an excellent way for updating blocks that Elkhorn has outlined. And it could be like a trickle release. Like you don't have to do them all in one. You could say, put in a little bit at a time, release them when they make sense. Maybe if you're updating the nether with a few things in a dot release, then also include those updates to quartz walls, because that's where we find quartz. Or maybe if you're updating a bunch of other things like calcite and other white blocks, then maybe also update quartz, at the same time. Something that would make sense for um, checking off all those things at once, not like every stair slab variant, but like a lot of them. It would be nice, for example, to have natural stone walls. That would be nice. We've got stairs and slabs, but not the walls. And I think that there are a few things like that I think always tempt me about modded Minecraft, when you want to have all those different variants at your fingertips, and you get very used to it very quickly, and then you go back to playing vanilla. Even with data packs, you're like, man, there's definitely some things that are missing for me. I mean, I use data packs mostly on the Citadel for recipe stuff, so I don't really give myself a lot of new blocks. I think the one exception would be the coarse dirt slab, which again just helps the landscape that I makes feel smoother when I want it to. I think the tricky thing about the dot releases, as we'll see in our next email, is the constant march forward that happens with Minecraft. Instead of updating twice a year, it might update several times, with dots coming in between major releases. And if the players get what they want, which seems to be, as Elkhorn pointed out, these variations in blocks, then there could be 2, 3, and 4 versions of a release of Minecraft before the next one updates. That means that mod makers and data pack makers have to update with every release of Minecraft for it to function correctly. So it puts a little bit more pressure on that community to kind of like keep up to speed, which can be the case sometimes, but is not always.
Yeah, we kind of have yet to see what the real impact is going to be on the modding community for these smaller releases. And it's definitely the case on Empires that we've run into issues where we can't update really past 119.1. We got there very late. Like, we got there when 119.4 was really coming out, and we planned to update all the way, but then something happened to the way shields are rendered that means the custom shields that we've textured into the game have just been completely broken by updating our mod to 119.4, so we've just ended up not doing it. And like that's not going to have a huge impact on us generally, but if you consider the knock-on effect that has on the entire modded Minecraft community, it's kind of an interesting thought. I'm also still kind of curious what the internal reasons are for not having certain types of walls, because there's been a decision made at some stage that we're not putting resources into this and that. Maybe, the artists are just needed elsewhere, and maybe like other stuff just needs to be done, but we have diorite, andesite, and granite walls, but not the polished variants of those. Is it just that the texture didn't really work? Didn't really feel like it added anything next to like a stone brick wall, for example? I'm just kind of curious where the thought process goes there. And it's funny because prismarine bricks are another outstanding thing. Like prismarine bricks and the tile prismarine texture, the dark prismarine, don't have any walls, but they do have slabs and stairs. And prismarine brick stairs look really weird because it's using the same texture it would apply to a 6-sided cube, but it gets indented by the section that's cut out of the stairs, and then the lines in the different bricks just don't line up. If you look at it from certain angles, the texture just looks completely wrong, and none of it really matches up. But those still exist, so it doesn't seem to be like the texture doesn't work for this block model, and it's egregiously noticeable that that's different. It's more just, withholding it for other reasons internally, whether just lack of resources or they just don't feel like those should exist at this stage. And I am like always curious about whether or not that's the case, but I don't know who to ask, whether it's the right question to ask, because I imagine a lot of it's just going to be a shrug. There was a really interesting short that they posted on the YouTube channel for Minecraft not too long ago, which was Samuel Orberg, who does the sound design for a lot of Minecraft, or at least heads the sound design team. I'm not sure how many people work on that as well as him at this point. Also did the sound for Minecraft Legends, but he was answering a question from the community, and people were saying, why don't we have more ambience in overworld biomes? Like, why don't we get more ambience in, overworld environments the way we now have it in the Nether and in caves and a few other places? And he said, yeah, I really want to do it. Like, I'm hoping it's something we can prioritize in future. So it's not like there are dissenting voices throughout the entire thing and everyone's following the same company line on this is why we're not doing it. I imagine there are people internally who want to have all of the walls and slabs and stairs of all of the different materials as well, but for whatever reason, the creative decision has been made not to include those yet.
I wonder if it's just a personnel issue. Like Mojang is not a huge development team, when you look at the grand scheme of video games. And I'm wondering if it's just like they've got a number of priorities they have to work on. They've got these releases and new features that they're working on. There's obviously a roadmap, and maybe just personnel wise, maybe just the resources are tapped, and they have to kind of give things a certain priority. And if you have time, you can work on your polished andesite walls, which, by the way, because of the data pack that I have for mini blocks, where I trade with the Wandering Trader for little head size versions of all the blocks in the game, there's a polished andesite version, and it looks really slick on the top of any wall because it looks like a little ornament, like it looks like a little like a banister top. I can't remember what they're called.
Like a finial on a curtain rail or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it looks like. But, and the polished andesite texture looks just fine. And if it was on the wall behind it or underneath it, then you could absolutely have andesite, polished andesite block into polished andesite wall into, for me, polished andesite head block, and you could add all kinds of ideas and variation to the different things as you go up towers or create railings or whatever it is that you want to do. The thing that Elkhorn was focusing on was mostly stone. I also think that walls would be great. Maybe you don't want to call them walls. You can call them posts. But wood, I know that wood already has a lot of variants, but having wood posts that are the same size as walls, I think would be great, because then it can add a lot to your fence designs and things like that. And it's the thing that always pops into my head as to why not is like, oh, well, the inventory, there's so much stuff, and adding more stuff just creates more inventory problems for people that want to carry a lot of things around. And I think to my head, like, there's already enough in the game that causes the problems. I don't know if adding more block variants is going to break the back that's already broken.
Sure, yeah.
Like, I don't think at this point adding in trickles of new block variants is really going to, like, all of a sudden cause an inventory crisis across all players. I think we're already dealing with one, and I don't think adding another couple of blocks every couple of months is going to change that. So,
yeah.
I'm all for it.
It's a balancing act, really, of appeasing the people who want more stuff and then appeasing the people who think they're not addressing the root of the problem, which is, inventory being more manageable overall. But maybe in the meantime, like you said, that may be why people have mods.
Speaking of balancing, next email comes in from Luna, not having to mod anymore. Howdy, Pix and Joel. In the 9 years that I've been playing Minecraft, most of my playtime was in modded. Though not because of the additional content, I always found some of Minecraft's mechanics unintrusive, small things like uneditable signs or crafting being tedious or big things like villager mechanics. I've always downloaded hundreds of tiny mods to tweak those features, but increasingly as Minecraft keeps getting updated, especially with updates like the Village and Pillage update, with new workstations and caves and cliffs, and now trails and tails with a bunch of customization features, I find my mod list whittled down to just performance mods as I become more satisfied with vanilla Minecraft. I find myself at an impasse. Should I switch to vanilla, where the game is stable, if a bit familiar, or should I keep modding where there can be wild changes to activate my brain into, ooh, new and shiny, while sometimes being a crashy mess with weird troubleshooting problems? You see this dichotomy in the player base wanting more quality of life updates versus shiny new things in the community as well. Some players even growing bored with the more methodical updates, while others want more established features. Food for thought, I guess. Luna died of her computer exploding from too many mods. Pro tip. Don't click the TNT mod.
Yeah, yeah, that's
not a good one.
If your computer is in favor of is about to explode, then yeah, I can thoroughly advocate for vanilla Minecraft, which as of the most recent updates, hasn't made my computer explode, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, like, this is a really interesting approach to modding. I hadn't ever really considered that there are some people who just wanted Minecraft itself, like the core experience, to be more approachable, and threw a ton of mods at it for that reason, beyond just performance mods. I mean, like the quality of life mods. I knew there was a market for those, but I always thought of them as something that goes hand in hand with other stuff that provides major content updates. I never thought that there'd be people who'd be playing vanilla Minecraft just with all of those little tweaks thrown in. And I've seen people with a couple of tweaks, like a minimap and like an armor HUD and stuff like that. But the editable sign thing, changing villager mechanics, making crafting easier. I suppose there are a whole suite of mods that people would be using that one by one they're sort of starting to come back around to the vanilla way of doing things, or the vanilla way has improved to the point where they are catching up with the modded experience that way.
Another good example is I can't remember the name of the mod, but it's the one that gives you all of the blocks in the game, similar to a creative menu, kind of on the right-hand side.
Yeah, just enough items or not enough items. There's
like
been
that.
a variety of them depending on which version of the game and what mod loader you use and stuff like that. But yeah.
And you can't craft from there, but you can at least look up the thing that you want and then find a way to get it in game, and then go and set out your plan to go collect those materials and then find a crafting table and do it. And you don't have to be next to a crafting table to open up, the interface and just kind of see. And then something that I find that I get stuck on, Cosmic and I joke on the stream sometimes when I'm asking the chat kind of partially rhetorically, hey, like what other blocks could I put in here? And everybody else who is very familiar with Minecraft all of a sudden draws a blank on what stairs are available. And so I have to walk over to the crafting table, type in stair, and just like scroll through the crafting table to remind myself, oh yeah, there's deep slate stairs, and there's all these different things. Like I forgot about smooth quartz or like stuff like that, especially because there's been a lot of stuff added to the game in the last few years, as Luna pointed out. And it can be very easy to forget, like, oh right, rooted dirt is a thing. Like I'm not just stuck with grass, path block, and coarse dirt. Like there's another texture I can throw in there. Another one is packed mud, which you've been using, a lot in your path work and stuff on Empires. And again, I have to like remember, right, that's a thing that I can get in this game. And I think having, that accessible, in a list is nice. I'm not saying that should be how Minecraft presents itself the moment that you boot it up for the first time. But I think, having some sort of research tree or, tech unlock, for me, it kind of reminds me of Satisfactory, where you see some tiers. You can see in the computer, oh, here's the 8 tiers and all the sub tiers and what you get at each stage. So you can look ahead and go like, ooh, trains. All right, I like trains. What is my research road to get to trains? And it would be really neat if Minecraft kind of like gave you a little bit of that kind of video game path where like, I've seen people play Minecraft and they built this really cool redstone contraption, and that's what I want out of this game. I'm now punching a tree, but what's my path to redstone? Like what do I need to find? You need slime, you need redstone, you need stone, you need certain items, to craft things together. And Minecraft gives you that a little bit when you like harvest redstone for the first time. It gives you some new recipes in the book. But it can be like if you're not paying attention, or if you're trying not to die somewhere, you miss the prompt. And I feel like if they had kind of like a trackable journal or tech tree or something like that, it could help with what Luna was saying about things just being unintuitive. I think I might have used the wrong word when I read the email, but unintuitive, I think, is something that a lot of times when you're playing a game, when it doesn't make sense, then I feel like the modders that get into this kind of headspace are like borderline game developers, right? They're just like, well, you've done it, but that's not how I would do it. Here's a more common sense way that I would want to do it. And the nice thing is that with mods and data packs especially, because data packs are a way to lean into these kind of quality of life things that just make sense without going into the whole modded thing. You don't need another launcher. Even though we do run a modded launcher for the Citadel because of all the performance updates we run or mods we run for like lighting and rendering and frame rate and all that kind of stuff. But it allows me to add in data packs, which are, they're not reliant on fabric, for things like being able to cut wood in the stone cutter. Like you see a stone cutter, you see the advantage of using a stone cutter, and there's all this wood in Minecraft and there's no wood cutter. And it just, that's one of those things that doesn't make sense. Why isn't there a wood cutter? And it could go back to what we were saying earlier about like just resources at Mojang and not wanting to conflate or add yet another thing into the crafting sphere to confuse people. So keeping it simple with the crafting bench. But I've added recipes via data pack to the stone cutter for wood, and it makes my life a lot easier. I'm no longer going through the crafting table and the recipe book interface. I get a very straightforward interface in the stone cutter, which I think is kind of like the crafting table 2.0, in a lot of ways. and I get my wood that way. And it makes sense to me now to the point where I forget that it's not vanilla.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, honestly, to address Luna's question directly here, should I switch to vanilla or should I keep modding? 1.20 is going to be a great time to switch to purely vanilla. With performance mods if you need them, since those are usually out within a couple of days of the full release of an update. But I do think if you want to try switching to vanilla and leave all of the modded stuff behind just for a little while and see what the actual vanilla experience is like, the fresh updates are a really good time to do that. It's a time when you can start a brand new world, start looking around, start finding all of that stuff, and then you're keeping a mental checklist of the stuff that still causes those issues for you, the stuff that still doesn't quite feel like it's implemented right. And then a little while into the update, when those feelings become insurmountable, that's when you can consider going back to modded. It doesn't have to be one or the other. In fact, it's been one for you for a while, but vanilla has always been there in the background, providing the foundation for everything else that you're adding on top of it. So I think, like, start playing vanilla in 1.20, and then once the 1.20 mod scene starts to catch up a little bit, hopefully they'll have some solutions to some of the things you find unintuitive about the vanilla experience in 1.20.
I think that's sound advice. I think that, waiting until your eye twitches to add them back in. Or, I mean, and you might also be able to find a data pack that could bring you close enough to a mod experience where you're like, you know what, maybe I don't have to get a mod for this. I could just find like a data pack or a recipe or something like that that might kind of get you just that little bit further. But I would be very curious to hear, back from Luna or back from anybody else in our audience that hasn't been playing a lot of modded and wants to jump into 1.20 when it comes out and just kind of see, like, since, especially if it's been a long time since you've played vanilla Minecraft, just how far it's come and whether or not, you feel like the experience is more on par with how you've been playing Minecraft for the last little while.
Yeah, a vanilla Minecraft in 1.20 is waggling its eyebrows at you going, hey, we have cherrywood now. It's been 12 years, but we have cherrywood. So speaking of things that make our eyes twitch, let's go talk about Minecraft Legends. And I say this kind of semi-jokingly, but also knowing that Joel has had a less than perfect experience of Minecraft Legends post-launch. So I think I'm going to let you go first, because I feel like we should maybe round things off on a slightly more positive note, but I know that your experience of Legends so far has not really been the best.
So I just loaded it up like everybody else and started playing through the tutorial, which was straightforward, and started on the campaign. I did about 2 hours of the campaign. I believe you joined me for a multiplayer co-op campaign after that for between an hour and 2 hours, maybe
sort of
once
it got into like the open world stuff where you're trying to figure out like, where do I go, how do I defend the villages, that kind of thing. Yeah,
like I didn't have a singular mission. I basically had, like, the map opened up and there was like several different piglin I'll call them bases, different colors, outposts. There was different colors, all the factions were revealed to me on the map. There were just like, there's the green ones, the red ones, and I think the yellow ones. I can't remember the color. And so, like, that was kind of where I was out there and trying to decide what to do. And I think the first thing that came up was like, oh, well, this village is about to get attacked. And so you and I, had to defend the village. And so we did the co-op thing. We built the turrets and the walls and then defended the piglins at night and rebuilt the structures where we could. And then we went off to go do something else. Like, I can't remember exactly what it was that we did. This was about a week ago.
I think we ended up taking down a smaller piglin outpost. Like, they start to build these extra bases beyond what they have established at the beginning of the campaign. And we just went into one of those, took down the structures, freed a bunch of villagers that they had contained there, and that was kind of where we ended it, I think.
Yeah. And so when I went back to it on my next stream, I continued with the single player campaign. I'll use that word loosely because I don't find it very structured. But I mean, the premise was quite straightforward. There are piglins everywhere. We need to get rid of them. They're nasty little, snotmongers. And so you want to, it's an easy world to traverse in terms of, like, movement is fun. It's very pretty, so it entices you to get in there and play the game. I didn't have any issues with, like, frame rates or with, we'll say, like, camera responsiveness. Like, most of that was pretty good. There were some tweaks. The defaults were very off. I found that I had to really, tweak things, but they give you that option, and I mean, as they should. So that was easy to dial in. The one thing that I will say, I haven't seen anybody else have this problem, and I am not having it on any other game, so I know it's not a hardware issue. But something that I do in Minecraft Legends when moving around ends up with my character kind of moving constantly in a single direction. Usually it was like between W and A. So like kind of like forward to your left. And I wouldn't touch the keyboard, wouldn't touch the mouse. My character would just run in that direction. And I would steer. I could steer and I could move somewhere else. And then when I stopped moving somewhere else, it would go off in a different direction again. And the only thing that I could find that would actually fix this would be to tap escape, bring up the game menu, and then go back in, and my character would stop moving. So
It's
there's obviously
weird.
some sort of bug, some
Yeah.
sort of weird bug. I'm playing on a PC, and it was through the Windows Game Store. I didn't buy it on Steam. Like this was the Game Pass install.
And you're playing with keyboard and mouse, so it's not like it's a
Keyboard and mouse.
controller like joystick drift kind of
Exactly.
problem. Like it's
And
the kind of thing that was happening to me with my old Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons, and I ended up replacing them. But
exactly.
like you, I've not heard of anybody else having this movement bug. So it's really unfortunate that that kind of added to the difficulty of the experience.
And again, like I'm using the exact same keyboard and mouse to play Minecraft, to play Satisfactory, to do everything else on that computer, just
Yeah.
from a straight up, if there was a keyboard being pressed, then like browsing the internet would be like hellish.
Yeah,
like
sure.
there would be all kinds of hard stuff. Anyway, so we get into the campaign, and the mission, like I said, the statement was clear: destroy the piglins. The three story characters kept interrupting me to tell me that there was a village that was going to be attacked tonight. And sometimes it was straightforward. And if you're paying attention, they would put a little flag over the village, and you say, okay, well, I'll go to that village and I'll protect it. And as you go through, you get like lessons in like, oh, if you build these things at your main fountain, then you can expand your knowledge and your capabilities. And if you build these fountains farther out into the world, then you can use that as your respawn point, kind of like a bed in Minecraft. So, okay, straightforward. But when I stumbled on some larger piglin encampments, I was told I wasn't ready to fight. And then I would find smaller ones and attack them and destroy them, and then no progress was logged. Or that would take the entire day. Then I'd have to go back to a village at night and defend it. And then by the time the next day rose again, the piglins had expanded. So like it was a one step forward, one step back. Like you take out a piglin encampment, and then you go and defend a village, and then during the night they've expanded again. So I thought, well, how do you make any progress? So then I started using the ability of the allays to remove the nether creep that happens, and I ended up removing all of the nether creep. But the area never actually fully healed. There were still like the ruins of the structures and the lava pits
Yeah.
and stuff. So I was like, all right, well, that's not it. Like, it's not like in the Zerg stuff in StarCraft. If you remove the gross stuff that the Zerg build on, then they can't build anymore. And that didn't work. So I realized that the allay's ability to create grass out of netherrack was meant more for when you're advancing into a larger base and you want to build structures or build your spawners within the piglin base, so that you don't have to go back as far every time. It's more like a leapfrog kind of advancement kind of technique. So I started doing that. I found that, once it introduced me to redstone, it got me into the mechanics of like, oh, this is a tough piglin base. The only way that you're going to be able to fight this piglin base is by building a redstone launcher. And so I thought, okay, I found the next tech kind of progression moment. And these things are not obvious. Like, you kind of stumble into a cinematic. You think you're going to advance, you get all ready, and you get ready to march into a piglin base, and then it just stops and plays a cinematic explanation of like, oh, you should probably use one of these. This is too tough a base. You need the redstone launcher to make quick use of these buildings. So I thought, okay, I build the redstone launcher. I go through this process of building the redstone launcher, making progress, realizing that as I got closer to the tower, there were, or what were they called, lava coils. And so the mission was to destroy the portal, but the lava coils were protecting the portal. So you could not attack the portal.
They make it invulnerable, yeah.
Yeah, so you had to take out the coils first, and the coils are really deep in the base. So very obviously, you have to use the redstone launcher to do that. So I'm invested in this battle, and everything's going. And then I'm building bridges and I'm kind of climbing up these cliffs because they don't make these bases accessible. Like they're way up high. You have to really use the build mechanics to build ramps and all this kind of stuff, which, well, I'll get to some of the issues in a minute. But I get up there and I finally figure out how to get through and attack the thing. The lava coils are down. I have to regroup because there's a bunch of piglins that are absolutely dismantling my golems, and I can't seem to figure out how to get past all this stuff. So like my next phase is going to be to aim the redstone launcher at these piglins instead of the structures. I got the portal down to maybe like 67% or something like that. It was taking a very long time. And then on the way back down the ramp to gather more troops and heal myself, the movement bug happened and I fell off the side of the bridge. And because I was low health, I died from fall damage because I was high up. And I thought, well, that's unfortunate, but whatever. Like I know where I was. I have my respawn point set, or at least I thought I did. Then the game says this piglin village is under attack. You need to protect it. Respawns me at this event that was unscheduled and not the battle that I was in the middle of. So any momentum that I had going into this battle, all of my army that was left that was up at this other battle, and I have now spawned in this village that is under attack on 3 sides from piglins, which means that I have to defend it now.
You're suddenly pivoting in your gameplay style from offensive to defensive, yeah.
Exactly. And I was in the middle of a task that the game had given me. Like I didn't choose to take out this village with the redstone launcher. The game said, you need to take out this village with the redstone launcher right now. That's the best thing to do. And then they said, oh, wait, no, the best thing to do is to defend this other piglin village. And I'm thinking in my head, like, I don't know. In my experience, these piglins rebuild overnight. So I don't know whether while I'm not at the redstone launcher attack, if they're regrouping and rebuilding and summoning more troops, whether I'm losing my ground. And then now I'm defending the piglin stuff. Like it became all kinds of helter-skelter. And, you know, in doing all this and in fighting all this, that was frustrating. And that's kind of where I ended my last stream. But the whole time, something was just kind of nagging at me. And the words that kept on coming out when people were coming in my stream and asking me what I thought about it is that it's very pretty, but it's very tedious. And trying to lay down any real strategy is nigh impossible. It's not clear that your golems are actually listening to you other than running around behind you. That part is clear. But if you try to get them to attack anything, half of the time they're not listening. Half of them follow you when you don't want them to. I've tried listening and working with the banner mode, which is an awkward number of key presses that you have to manage to get this done. They're like goldfish, and they forget to do anything the moment that they're done anything or any hurdle shows up. If you set them to attack a building, fine. Your stone golems are going to hammer this thing until it blows up. When they're done, they will stand there and do absolutely nothing, including if they're getting attacked by piglins. They'll just stand there until you go and grab them. And if you attack a piglin, then all of your golems will come in. But there's no way to tell your golems to attack piglins while you do something else. They're kind of just are always at your back. And so in doing so, you can't really separate your golems effectively. You can walk over to them and use your, banner to summon them to your command, but you have to be within their facility, which is a small radius. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can that radius be increased later on, like with updates and upgrades and things?
The radius that your banner pulls units in, yes. People. Yes, okay. Yeah, you can increase the banner radius, you can increase the maximum amount of units you can control at one time. All of that comes through upgrades, which the campaign dishes out very sparingly, I think because there aren't a huge amount of them, and so you don't want the player to be fully developed within the first hour of the campaign, but it starts to feel kind of punishing because they are giving you the options to develop in a number of different directions, but if you don't make certain decisions, you might be slowing it down for yourself and making it harder to manage individual sets of troops without those expansions. I'm not as far in the campaign, I think, as you are, so I might have not reached the point where that's possible yet, but I am finding that, that there are certain things that feel quite slow about the campaign, especially when you compare it to PvP, which we'll get onto a little bit later.
And the thing is, the campaign, it doesn't really have this set of missions. You're constantly being interrupted by the story characters to say this piglin base is going to expand tonight, or this village is going to be under attack. And I'll get into some of the graphic design issues in a bit, but it's not clear what the strategy is beyond we have to remove the piglins. Like, it doesn't indicate to you which faction you should remove first. It doesn't indicate to you uh, whether you should defend the village or whether you should continue on with what you were doing. There's no hint as to say, like, while it's important what you're doing, you should really defend this village, or the reverse. They say the village might be okay, but you should really try to finish off the space. They don't give you that, that hint. So in a way, I think it's a failure of the sandbox nature of Minecraft being brought into a strategy game where, like, you need missions, like you need tasks, you need a hit list of things that you should really do. It doesn't have to be a list that has to be done in a specific order, but it would be nice to be able to, like, look, you have to take out this thing and that thing, or this is a new thing the piglins have just developed. It's probably best we nip this in the bud. Like, that would give you a clear objective, right? Objective is what I'm looking for as a word.
Yeah.
So that is a problem. So when you're engaging with piglins, the most effective way to deal with piglins is not your golems. It's just you. You've got one move, one sword swing, and you run around in a circle smacking them. And that gets old real quick. And there's no advantage that I've found to having arrow golems or stone golems with you. Like, as soon as the arrow golems decide they have a target, you've already killed it because you're up front. And against the smaller piglins, you're pretty good.
With the smaller ones especially, yes.
Yeah. And then the bigger piglins, they will nuke your dudes. Like, if it's a flame throwing piglin, then your wooden plank golems are on fire and gone, before that they can even get to you. And I mean, like, I don't know if the player gets any upgrades, like whether you feel more powerful as time goes on. Like, do you have any knockback? You don't.
Unfortunately, no. Like, at least not as far as I have found. And that's another issue that comes up in PvP, is that taking out the player sort of becomes one of the major factors of PvP skirmishes. Like, if you end up facing down somebody else with another group of golems, if you target all of their golems, but then all of their golems target you, you're out of the picture really quickly, and then your units, like you said, don't have the AI that tells them, okay, I should keep attacking just whatever's around me. They just kind of stand there. And so the fact that the player can't be improved in any way, that you don't get any extra health, or you can't craft yourself armor or anything, does, like, the only thing that you can change is your mount, and the mount doesn't really factor into how healthy you are. It's just how fast you can move, whether you can glide a little bit. So yeah, there's a lot of like powerlessness that it starts to feel, even though you're supposed to be the commander of these armies and you're supposed to be the powerful one surrounded by units that are supposed to help you with the objective rather than just be defending you against a potential early death. And like you said, with the full damage aspect as well, there's not a whole lot you can do about it sometimes.
Or when your golems walk off the side of something and they fall down 2 blocks and they can't get up. They're just stuck there until you find a place that you can recall them. Like, I will attach a review from PC Gamer for Minecraft Legends in the show notes, and they gave it a 50 score out of 100. And one of the quotes that kind of resonated with me from the review was, "Every battle makes me less of a commander of armies and more of a minder of preschoolers." Like, they really, the minions are just, the golems are just kind of like mindless. And I heard from you, as we were discussing live on stream, that things like the zombies are a little bit more resilient. The skeletons have got more armor and way more range than your plank golems. The game never told me how to get them. I have the structure. They say, oh, here is I guess it's coal and diamonds for skeletons, maybe. Anyway, you build your upgrade structure, and then you have the ability to make a skeleton spawner. So says the game. But then you can't. It's not in your hotbar. You can't add it to your hotbar. It's nowhere. Now, somebody in chat told me, which, wasn't how I wanted to find out, that you then have to somehow find skeletons on the map to unlock the ability to make the spawner. But the game itself does not tell you that unless I missed it. And I don't find that kind of stuff is clear. So when you want to, like, I was in that attempt to take out that piglin portal, what I really needed was more range, because anytime I got in range, I got owned because of the spore nature of these piglin guys that were coming at me. And a lot of mushroom stuff, a lot of AoE. They had like a poison cloud around them. And so what I wanted was skeletons that could shoot them from a mile away. And I couldn't do it, even though I knew I had unlocked the ability. So it was really frustrating. And yeah, in my laying out of strategy, I think that the GUI is what really kind of was frustrating to me. You know, when you're trying to command your armies, you get a quick circle indicator when you've rallied your golems, but nothing to indicate, you know, when you've lost one in battle other than your flames of war going down. And you're probably using the wrong words for these, but when that goes down, you know you've lost somebody, but there's no other indication in your, you know, you don't have a list that says you've got 6 stone golems and 4 of these and 5 of those, all that kind of stuff. And they die in battle quickly, or they fall off a cliff, and which happens even more often. The banner mode feedback, because I had questions about that before the game even offered it to me as an option. I just hadn't gotten that far in the campaign. I think I had talked to you about it like just before it was unlocked. And the feedback for me graphically uses the opposite of what normal UI colors indicate. Blue is bad, red is good. Where other parts of the game, like building, it's the reverse, as you expect. Red, bad, you can't build there. Blue, it will build there. And I think they've got that backwards. There's not even a real good sound confirmation. Like again, an example with StarCraft, like if you had a bunch of Marines and you told them to attack to a building, somebody would go like, aye, aye, Captain, or like on it, you know, like you'd hear them say confirmed, like I got your command, I'm going to go do that. The building would flash a little bit, and you'd know that group of Marines was attacking that supply depot or whatever. And that feedback information is lacking incredibly from Legends.
Yeah.
The map is an illustrated map with one zoom level. Neither clearly communicate where you are in relation to the structures. The structures are not to scale. The distance is not to scale. It's a voxel-based game. Make a voxel or a pixel-based map so players know where they are. I was taking out outposts or encampments or something and wondering why the structures on the map weren't changing, because I was right next to them. Turns out I wasn't next to them. I was miles away. And so that lack of communication from the map really had me confused. I had other people coming in and telling me, you know, that I wasn't next to what I thought I was next to. You know, I find that, you know, indicating what's going to be attacked next with a light brown flag on a beige map is a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. There's also a light beige like ring indicator on the ground outside of like a village that might get attacked or a piglin base that might expand, again on a beige map. There's a bunch of things with bright turquoise rings around them with no explanation whatsoever, and they don't blink nothing. So why, when something is like this base is going to be attacked, why is it not flashing red? Why isn't there a big red arrow around it? They've taken the time to illustrate this map, but there's no, like the graphic UI is really difficult to track. Like I even said, I can see this on my screen, but the stream couldn't. The stream couldn't figure out what I was looking at because the color was so close to the background that they couldn't understand what I was looking at. I also find that the graphic design in the logbook is really tricky. You know, you want to create your hotbar and put different things on your hotbar. You have to go into the logbook to do it. And then things are very clearly buttons, but you can't click on it with a mouse. It's all keyboard indicated. Now, some of that might be because this is playable on PC and Xbox and Nintendo Switch and all that kind of stuff. So some of those choices might be because of that. But I'm on a PC, like let me click on things that look like buttons. I feel like there's a lot of very odd, like double or triple clicking a button just to do a task that should be as simple as dragging something like in your Minecraft inventory from your inventory to your hotbar, you know, or shift clicking it down into place. That kind of like intuitiveness for so many other video games out there is just not there. They're doing it differently for whatever reason. I just don't know. And lastly, the building. And the building is fine, I guess. It's clearly not meant to be a precise art. And I think you can maybe chime into this because you've probably built more in PvP, you know, than I have. But there are some things that make no sense. Like you can single click on a ramp and dismantle it and it all comes back. By the way, don't stand on them when you do that because you will fall. And don't do it by accident because you can do that too. But then, you know, when you want to dismantle a wall, it's literally one plank at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, because the walls can be, they're not a fixed length. You decide how long they're going to be, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you decide that you want to take down a wall, don't let the piglins do it for you. It's faster. It's faster to wait to nightfall for them to come in and smack it down. You'd be better off just to like harvest more wood and build the new wall where you want it and wait for the old wall to fall via natural, terms. Building and taking it down wall by wall is incredibly frustrating. I was surprised actually that was a mechanic that was decided. Yes, this is a good idea on how to take down a wall. So I did not spend a lot of time building defensively because I did not play that long. I think I logged about a total of between 6 and 8 hours in the game, and I just found the experience so frustrating and not being able to do what I want. And some of this might come from having a lot of history playing strategy games. But if Minecraft Legends is going to be a action strategy, there has to be some strategy. You have to be able to think for yourself and try new things. And when you can't do anything but basically point and click and smack people, then it's really just like, it might have been better off as like an RPG, like a different version of Minecraft Dungeons where you've got some minions that you can bring with you, but like ultimately you're the hero, you're the one doing all the fighting, because that's what it feels like. You don't really get any advantage other than some golems are better at taking down buildings than you are, and that's about it.
So for me, like, I want to preface by saying I actually quite like this game. Against my better judgment, I feel like, because like basically everybody around me is saying like this game needs work, and that's why I feel like I haven't been back to it much since playing through the first like hour or so of the campaign past what I'd already played. So past the scene in which the piglins get their own corrupted beacon and they darken the sky, and then the open world element of the campaign happens. So I played about an hour after that, and yeah, like I think where this differs from Minecraft Dungeons, and it's interesting that we bring up Minecraft Dungeons in relation to this, it feels like they've tried very hard to adhere to a few fundamental things that people feel like are the core of the Minecraft experience that just weren't present in Dungeons. The fact that you can build, the fact that the game is open world, and there being like a day-night cycle where the monsters come out at night. I think that's some of the core ideas of Minecraft that they thought, this is something we can bring from the sandbox game and bring it into this strategy environment that we want to build for a game like Minecraft Legends. So obviously the game being open world, players having exploration, making their own objectives to a certain extent. I recognize that you've already given us an example of the game giving you one objective and then sidebarring you into a completely different objective halfway through, so it doesn't always feel like that. But I do think there is a certain amount of experimentation the game allows you to do. Unfortunately, where that experimentation ends is when you attack a piglin base, because there are very specific roles that they want everything to have. So it gets a little bit tricky to figure out the way the game wants you to play when they've given you an environment that feels like it's encouraging experimentation. So, like you, one of the things I liked to do was I just steamrolled a very easy piglin outpost and then built that convert netherrack improvement and spent some time just completely terraforming it to see if I could. And perhaps like you, yeah, I was disappointed that the allays just kind of paper over the netherrack with a thin veneer of artificial grass. It kind of feels like they astroturf the place, and then you can build some stuff, but then there's still some netherrack visible. The lava is still there that all of my villagers were basically jumping in after I'd freed them from the cages, and there's one piglin staircase there that I just can't destroy. The sky still turns red and has like, warped forest or crimson forest particles when you go there. So there's still some things that don't feel like you're making as much of a difference. And it does make sense for their philosophy that they've outlined for the game, where the piglins are leaving permanent scars in the overworld. And so like it kind of feels like, yeah, the battle won't be truly over until you've managed to complete the rest of the campaign and remove the piglins from the world. The monsters coming out at night thing is really part of it, with those roving bands of piglins that are more active at night. They're even more active in PvP matches. They attack your base a lot more at night. And then obviously that's where the base defense objectives kick in during the campaign. But there's no way to skip the night the way there is in the sandbox element of Minecraft. So if you're in the middle of a daytime objective for you, which is, hey, let's go and take down one of the larger outposts, or at least try and make some headway on that, you get interrupted by the night half of the cycle, and there's nothing you can really do about that. And I can absolutely see that being a frustration. But it feels like that's the kind of thing that they've taken from the core Minecraft experience and gone, how can we fit this into this action strategy kind of formula. And I agree with you that experience with an RTS almost works against you when you're taking on this game, because it's supposed to appeal to the same kind of mechanics, but they very much decided to blaze their own trail in terms of how the game feels to operate. And describing it as maybe a hybrid of something like Warcraft and something like Pikmin, where you're a character in the world and you're organizing all of these little guys who can sort of run off on their own, sounds charming, but can end up clashing a lot. And it feels like, as somebody who has an experience with a top-down RTS, it feels like a lot of the systems end up being unfamiliar and unfriendly and unintuitive, which is a real shame. There's a lot of this kind of sentiment out there that it seems like the team is listening to, so I really hope that they can take on board some of the more constructive criticism we've seen over the last week. They certainly seem to be doing that in terms of the PvP experience, but there are also some sort of glaring issues with the base game. So I think maybe some of that stuff hopefully is going to be prioritized, and then deepening the PvP experience can go on from there. Because I think at its core, this game is worth saving. If it is having a hard time right now, I think it is worth them investing some more time and energy, money, development time, whatever it needs to be, into turning this into the type of experience that players want to return to, because I would personally like to. It's got a lot to like about it. The animation is really charming. Like, as an animator yourself, I'm sure you you probably enjoyed some of the cutscenes, thought like the voice acting was kind of okay. I agree, the voice lines get a little intrusive when you're trying to plan anything, but like the cinematics and stuff, how did you feel about the way that developed the world that you were looking at?
Oh, the animation, the world itself when you're in it, the voice acting, the interaction between the story characters, what are they called? The three fates or something? The three spiritual folks that kind of walk you through the different stories and different upgrades and stuff.
I
It's all
forget if they
fantastic.
really like name them as a collective, but yeah, the tutorial characters basically.
Yeah, like knowledge,
Foresight
action, and
and-
foresight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, very cool, fun little flip where like the little dude has got the deep voice and the big golem action is like a child's voice.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. I mean, it's all very cute. The animation is really well done in that. The animation in the game is great too. Like the piglins dying is hilarious. Like they flop over. And the cutscenes where, what was it? The piglins had decided that we were making too much advancement, so they wanted to put something over their portal that would then block out the sun.
That's the corrupted beacon thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the corrupted beacon thing. And so the piglins in the cutscene, the little minions are installing it, and you immediately realize that they're standing far too close to this thing that is spinning up and about to do something. And when it explodes and shoots the beam into space, like piglins go flying everywhere, and it's hilarious, like, and really well animated. Like these guys are dumber than a bag of hammers, and like that kind of stuff as a cartoonist and an animator, and like I found all that kind of stuff really endearing. And those cutscenes did a good job of communicating this is what the piglins have done next. Obviously, this is bad. We have to destroy the thing that is blocking out the sun. And something that you and I think maybe talked about either privately or maybe we talked about it on the stream. I can't remember. But previous to that, when that had happened, I don't know if we had a night cycle. So when they shoot the sun and block it out, when you beat that part of the campaign and you get the sun back, it's not the sun, you get the moon. And then going forward, you have day-night cycles in the game. So in terms of like how this is supposed to be Minecraft Legends and so long in the past that it doesn't really apply to what everybody knows as Minecraft now, in that I think we just witnessed the first day-night cycle.
Yeah,
but
it's almost like a creation myth for that aspect of Minecraft. Yeah,
but you caught that, and I didn't. I mean,
notice
that.
I didn't even like. I'm going to raise my hand here. I didn't even catch it myself. Somebody in my YouTube comments pointed it out, and I think they'd seen it on Pearlescent Moon's videos or something. So it's like very much like third or fourth hand information at that point. But there are some little Easter eggs like that you can get from the cinematics, like the whole night beacon sequence starts with basically like a piglin witch comes out of nowhere and is like one of the horde of the spore guys with this kind of straggly hair and like a staff that seems to have the orb of dominance that we've seen in Minecraft Dungeons wielded by the Arch Illager. and that's how they like corrupt that beacon for the first time. Minecraft Dungeons has an accessory called a corrupted beacon that fires like a laser beam at stuff, and so people are speculating about how those games are connected to begin with. So there's like a lot of that, but it does suffer, I think, from the problem that the villains are getting way more development than the overworld characters and the heroes do, because you are the hero, you know, but you don't have a backstory in the same way. Link from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild like puts together a backstory of his past as you play through that game. Like, you don't have anything like that. So there's a little bit of characterization of creepers and skeletons that creeps in the early cutscenes. And from what I've heard from people who've completed the campaign, the story does take some interesting turns, but it really feels like the piglins are the ones who are going to get the most charisma, the most development throughout the entire campaign, which feels like a shame when they're the villains and you're supposed to be rooting for the hero side. But I suppose the escalation of the piglin threat is really what's driving the story, so it kind of makes sense. I think the thing that surprised me the most, having had a fair amount of all my experience really came from that PvP session that we played up in London, and I've played a bunch of PvP since, but I'm surprised how much of the campaign stuff doesn't carry over to PvP mode and vice versa. I was talking about this game on a previous show, saying, well, the tutorial and the kind of the campaign is really there to teach you how PvP works, so that you can take those mechanics into the PvP game when you start playing multiplayer and you're done with the story mode. And that's not exactly the case. Like, there's some stuff that just doesn't exist in either version. Like, in the campaign, villages farm resources for you. So every time you return to a village chest, they've got some stone and some of a precious resource. And if you defend them for a little bit more, then they start producing more of those resources. That doesn't happen in PvP. All of your resources have to be gathered by the player, which you're kind of used to doing anyway because you're the only one you have the control over, so like the player's agency is an important part of the campaign, but it might take a bit of getting used to if all you've done is the story up until that point. Meanwhile, in PvP, Prismarine is something that you get pretty much constantly and can really rush into getting right away to upgrade your settlement by taking down piglin structures. Then in the campaign, it's a reward for completing certain objectives, but you upgrade really slowly. Like, you unlock stuff bit by bit so that, like I said, you just don't rush the tech tree in the first hour and then roll over everything with the Firsts of Stone and some of the, like, bigger units that you get later. And there are some upgrades like the Netherrack conversion thing that simply don't appear in PvP. There's a couple, like, that I've seen elsewhere in the menu that just really aren't there. And then in the campaign, you can build well houses anywhere in the world to start a new base and create a fast travel point for yourself, which are, by the way, what those turquoise circles are. It's a place you can fast travel to.
Okay.
In PvP, you only have one base. And unlike in StarCraft, where you can sneakily create like a second Terran command center or start like another Zerg hive somewhere, you don't have the option to make another well house. So you can't stealthily create a second home base and then lure people into thinking they've demolished you. It's one wellspring and that's it. So there's a bit of a difference there, and I'm kind of surprised by how different those two are. I sort of wonder if we'll start to see some of that campaign stuff making its way into PvP modes in future, but I'm not entirely certain if that's the case. And to speak to some of the stuff that you've talked about already before we get into talking about PvP, I agree that there's a variety of like general issues that could really help this game if they were addressed. Like, the UI things, not being able to see individual units' health, I think is a problem. First of all, that makes it very difficult to see whether your medic units, the Mossy Golems and I think First of Brick is the bigger one, you can't see whether or not they're having an impact because your units are either there or they are not there, and they don't have any health bars, and there's no damage indicators like there are with structures where they'll start to appear cracked and like the mid-stage of a Minecraft block-breaking animation. Those don't happen with units at all, so it's difficult to tell whether you're actually benefiting from bringing the Mossy Golems with your army or not, other than like doing some serious playtesting and taking a bunch of Arrow Golems and some Mossy Golems into one base and then doing it without Mossy Golems as like a controlled experiment. So I'm curious about that. If they can potentially give some insight into how those units are doing, then that would be kind of helpful. And the units not knowing how to act on their own is such a big thing. Like, if a player gets taken down, those units are stranded, they can be picked off very easily, and they don't fight back. Even like the cobblestone golems will continue to take down structures when they're in the piglin bases in PvP. They sort of slowly wander over to them, but they'll still do it. And a lot of the time, that means that if your opponent is there and they've just swept you out of this piglin base to take control, they can continue using your stranded golems to their own advantage. They won't be able to order them around, but those will still be taking down structures, and they can collect the Prismarine by just standing in place nearby, which can kind of tip a PvP game in early stages especially. But yeah, players being the priority target in PvP, and when those PvE deaths come around, they get sort of frustratingly expensive, because it's more than likely that by the time you get back to those units, they'll have been wiped out. And so defending yourself becomes a priority, but it's very difficult to heal up on the fly, or you don't have any upgrades to improve your defense or your health, which makes the player feel increasingly fragile in late game, which is really unfortunate. And is never a problem in top-down RTSs, because you're not a unit on the battlefield controlling things. But more often than not in those games, if you have a hero unit, if they die, that's the ball game. If like Reyna dies on a mission in StarCraft, then you've lost, because he's a key part of the story. So players being able to respawn and return in this is kind of a double-edged sword. When it comes to units as well, they get into really illogical formations when you're dragging around a whole bunch of them. So, like, you're used to creepers as something that deals instant damage to structures from Minecraft. And incidentally, that's not really what they're for in Minecraft Legends, which is another problem. Some of those units aren't as effective at what you would expect them to be. Like, creepers are actually more effective to take down groups of enemy mobs rather than structures. But because we're used to creepers blowing up our builds in Minecraft, we kind of think, oh, they're probably anti-structure things. They explode and it takes down a tower and stuff. We've mathed it out a little bit in a Discord that we've been running between a bunch of us content creators, and it turns out that creepers are actually more expensive than the First of Stone, who is the big, like, bulldozing thing that throws rocks at a tower from a distance. And creepers are a one-shot mob because they explode and then you can't direct them around anymore. But they'll hang around towards the back of a group of golems. So if you send in cobblestone golems and creepers all in one group, they line up so the cobblestone golems are at the front and the creepers are at the back. But that means the cobblestone golems all cluster around the thing you're trying to destroy, and the creepers can't walk close enough to it to blow it up. And half the time they get picked off by arrow towers or ranged units or something else. So there's a few issues with that, sort of the way players want to use stuff, and the difficulty in that banner mode micromanagement stuff when you're first getting used to it, that really makes it feel a little bit rough to get through. And a lot of that has been borne out in PvP. The PvP is actually great fun with some friends in private matches. We've mostly played 4v4s, but I've done a couple of like 1v1s and other matchups. We've done some unevenly sided teams if a couple of us had more experience than the other, and we did a pretty decent attempt at a 3v4 where it was me, Fwip, and Shelby, I think, against like a few other folks, and we held our own for a good long time while somebody else was having trouble connecting. So that was fun. But I'm finding most of these matches either come down to an early rush that the opponent isn't prepared for, or you have to lay siege to them with redstone launchers and the First of Stone in late game. There's not really a whole lot of viable mid-game options, and that's kind of because the only limit on defensive towers is how many resources players have available. And arrow towers and scatter towers are a lot cheaper to build than the units that take them down are. So there's like a little bit of a balance issue. There's some stuff that could be corrected there, but ultimately PvP balance is not too bad. The main problem is that public PvP suffers from some pretty major issues. The main one being that there's no way to queue with specific people. So you can join a public game that's hosted by a friend, but you can't control which team you join. So you couldn't put together a team of 4 and then, offer that team of 4 up to play any sort of random opponents. Teams end up getting assigned based on an alternating basis from when you join the game. So the only way to guarantee that you're teaming up with your friends is if you join right after a stranger arrives to join the opposing team. So right now that's really janky, and the Legends team has actually confirmed via Twitter that a forthcoming update is going to resolve this. We have no timeline on that as far as I know, but that's the promise that they've made so far. The main reason you don't want to team with random people is that there's really no way of communicating with your teammates. There's no in-game chat, there's no in-game voice chat. Understandable considering that people are going to be on a variety of consoles and they're going to be of a variety of ages. It's really billed as like an all-ages game from sort of ages 7 and up or 10 and up. But the only thing it's possible to do is ping locations on the map or structures you're building. And like console players don't have time for, tapping away on the on-screen keyboard, and there's no emote system, there's no quick message system, there's nothing to really compensate for that. And the main issue there is that any player at any time can recall the entire army to their home base from one spawner. So if you have a cobblestone spawner built at your home base and you hit recall, it brings every unit back, not just the cobblestone golems, but it brings back the creepers that you might be using to rush the opponent's base and try and, create an opening. It brings back the firsts that you're, using to throw stones at their towers and try and make your way in. It brings back all kinds of stuff. And so anyone who's attempting to rush the opponent with no way to communicate that can very easily find themselves sabotaged by another player just recalling all their units to either help with base defense or just because they wanted to, just because they wanted to be the one bringing all of the army into the enemy base. And the other minor thing at this point is that it's locked to 4v4 matches when it comes to public. For private matches, you can put together anything from a 1v4 to a 4v4 and anything in between. But you can see a 1v1 or a 2v2 queue maybe being difficult to queue for because you've got to wait for like one person or two people to show up instead of just crowding as many people as you can into the same thing. Like it kind of maybe like narrows down the amount of people who'll be queuing for each individual game, and splits that up where they could all be getting into a match sooner in a 4v4 match. But it does feel like 1v1 would be a valuable game mode because it's got a very different pace to 4v4. You're doing all of the stuff yourself, so you don't always have time to rush the opponent's base because you're too busy trying to figure out what resources you'll need to defend your own, and it feels like there's more strategy compared to the kind of 4v4 chaos that you end up getting at that stage.
And that's where I think in a PvP situation, which I do want to try, like I haven't written off Legends completely, because I've watched some PvP matches, yourself included, and I've watched and hung out in other people's chats to get like different perspectives and stuff like that. I will say that I don't think I ever want to play against Flip or Grian.
Yes, no, I entirely support that. Yeah,
they seem to be pretty handily on top of things.
Yes,
but the things that I think are or would be frustrating in a PvP match are not having a mini map, like not having a way to see other players coming. Like you are basically flying blind. And one good thing about the map is that there's no fog of war. So when you go to look at your map, you can see the whole thing. Like you can see the layout of what's going on.
You know exactly where the opponent's base is, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in that way, that's kind of good. But then when you're in game, like when you're fighting, you can't see anything other than just what's in front of you because of you don't have a top-down view. And I can see how some players would then play the game at a much wider FOV to try to get as high up as you can so you can see more of a bird's eye view. But that again I would think would be frustrating trying to control the units in the way that they're controlled. So I do want to try some PvP. I definitely don't want to try public PvP because that to me, that the fact that system is as it has been released in PvP and that immediately the player feedback was like, nope, that's a bad idea, makes me wonder, did no one test it? Like, did no one that designed the game look at the PvP public matches and think, yeah, that's a good idea, we'll release it like this? I feel like when stuff like that happens, it's just like, it's just not done. Like, why is this being pushed out when people are going to want to play against each other? People are going to want to queue for public matches, and they're not going to want to play with strangers because of all the things that you just outlined, with recalling armies and all that kind of stuff. Like, how is it that isn't in the game? That seems like a real oversight to me. Now, good that they're addressing it. Good that it might be coming in a future update. Sure. And there are lots of games that I've played that received lots of updates to the point where I play them now and I think, man, I remember what this was like when I first played it. And I'm so glad that they've listened to the community and done all this. The difference is those games are in early access, right? They're not like a full release like this is. And I don't know because there hasn't been any communication that I've seen from the Legends team that this is meant to be an ongoing updated game, like Minecraft is an ongoing updated game. You know,
So there's a
so
couple of things.
yeah.
There's something I want to highlight specifically, which is one of the more positive things I can say about this as an experience is that they have a fourth option on the menu when you
Oh,
open it
right.
up. There's campaign, there's versus, there's a marketplace where you can buy skins and that kind of thing. And I'm not really going to touch on that because again, it's microtransaction stuff. I understand people have opinions against that stuff. It's all cosmetic, pretty much. The stuff that isn't cosmetic, there's a third option that I thought previously was called Lost Legends and It's called Lost Legends and Myths, and I thought that because the text just cut off when I was looking at it on my footage, and I didn't have time to go back and really look at that. So Lost Legends are monthly downloadable challenge maps that are created by the Legends team. And the first one is called Portal Pile. It's basically a wave survival tower defense kind of thing. There are 3 piglin portals surrounding a single village. You just build up your defenses, and every time you take out a wave, it gives you more resources. You have 30 seconds to prepare for the next wave, and then the piglins start rushing in with, an escalating amount of units and an escalating power level of units. But then every turn it sort of unlocks something new for you. So by the 4th or 5th wave, you can build scatter towers that fire 3 arrows instead of just 1, and later on you start getting the power towers that can deal incredible kind of damage or stun units or knock them back or whatever. So that kind of setup is available, and these seem like they're going to be a rolling content thing. The first one is free, and it's all tied into the marketplace stuff, so I don't know for certain whether the later ones will be paid content. But either way, I think if they keep those free and they keep the myths side of things paid for, then I think that's a good strategy, because myths are community created maps along those same lines. None are currently available because the game's only been out for however long, and I don't know if any teams have already been working behind the scenes with the Legends team to edit these maps. And how that stuff is available, because there is no map editor as part of Minecraft Legends by default. But it seems like there's going to be an option for people who create maps for the Bedrock marketplace to be able to produce, curate, and sell maps for Minecraft Legends through the Myths section of Lost Legends and Myths. So those at least will end up being a way for them to support the game with fresh content, potentially even while working on other stuff in the background, although, I cross my fingers at that point. I can hope. I think that was a really fun experience. It was a little frustrating at first. I had a couple of attempts at the Portal Pile and didn't do all that well, but then once I found the right strategy, it was a cakewalk. So I think there's potential for stuff like that to be really successful. And the overall feeling I get from this is that every aspect of this game is better played cooperatively. The campaign is easier if you're doing it with friends, because the problem you had where suddenly you were rushed into defending a village whilst somebody else while you were trying to make progress into a piglin base, if you had somebody else in the map with you, then you don't have to worry about that village because they can take care of that while you return to the main objective. PvP is obviously going to be that way. The Portal Pile map, I saw some people having an absolute blast with that with just 3 of them playing it because they had one person who could take care of each portal. And, you could communicate a little bit more. The problem, of course, being that I don't believe there's an option for any kind of split-screen co-op on consoles, so you do have to play from separate devices. But because it's on a lot of different consoles, your kid can be playing the Xbox on the TV, you can have the Switch on your lap, and you can be playing the same game. So there is potential for it to be a very effective co-op experience. The problem is, right now it doesn't seem to scale at all based on whether it's an individual playing it or a co-op thing. So effectively, anybody who is playing this game in single player is already playing it on a harder difficulty setting than anybody who's playing with friends. And a lot of players are used to Minecraft being a single player experience. Even if they're part of a server where people are from all over the world, and you're not always going to be online at the same time. You're at least building your own base for some parts of that, and nobody is playing Minecraft with somebody else all of the time. And that's going to be the case with Minecraft Legends as well. So I think even with there being 4 difficulty settings in this game, it feels like people are going to be automatically playing on hard mode if they're tackling this as a solo game.
And that goes to stuff that I was having frustrating times with in terms of controlling the army. Like you and I could jump in, you could be golem guy for stone golems, and I could be, arrow guy with skeletons. And going into battle, communicate with one another, and be just like, Pix, you focus on the buildings, and I'll keep the minions off your back. And we would probably own face if that was the case, because we would only have to worry about controlling one set. It was, like I would just be running around with my arrow guys and making sure that they're attacking not structures, but only piglins and only units that are threatening you. And that is something that you should be able to do in a strategy game in single player. But in this, technically they say you can, but I don't think the mechanic works very well. So I want to try some PvP, and I also wouldn't mind doing more campaign stuff and multiplayer. And as well, I want to test out the Xbox. Like I want to test to see if controller and that experience might be a little different as well. I may try a little bit of time off stream. I do sometimes get in my own head when I'm having a frustrating time with a game and I'm also streaming it.
Yeah, that's another thing.
You kind of put like a rough foot forward. I can absolutely tell, like my demeanor was different when you and I were on stream together versus when it was just me. So there is that as well. The one thing that I'll say to wrap up is that while it is available on a multiple of different platforms, it is definitely available on PC Game Pass or Xbox Game Pass. 1 month of either of those is cheaper than the retail price of actually buying Legends. So if you're seeing a lot of mixed reviews, if you're listening to this and going like, well, it sounds good, but then Joel didn't like it that much. And like, if you're on the fence, like try it out on PC or Xbox Game Pass for a month. During that month, you'll have access to all kinds of other games, but it means that if you don't like it, then you didn't purchase it for no reason. And you can just like, well, it wasn't for me. And I think that's important too, is that while it has, issues, and hopefully those will be addressed. Like it is able to be patched. There was a 10 gigabyte patch that I had to load before I even played because it had received a patch before launch day. The thing for me is that I think there's a lot of pressure from people that like Minecraft to then like Legends. You don't have to. It's a different game. Just because it's got the Minecraft, stamp on it doesn't mean it's for you. You might get in there and just hate every minute of it. And that's fine. It just means that maybe the strategy isn't for you. I think if that's the case, to take Johnny's advice, play with a friend, and if you're not worried about spoilers, play with a friend that's been in it longer than you have and can kind of walk you through. Because I think that by getting tips from other people, which is unfortunately something we have to do in Minecraft as well, it will make your gameplay experience that much easier. I know that my early Minecraft experience was expanded greatly by playing with Steven and by playing and watching some videos online. I got it. It clicked with me a lot faster than I think going into something like that blind would have. And I think that unfortunately, because the clarity and communication in Minecraft Legends is lacking, you're going to have to use the hive mind. Use your friends, use some content creators online that are sharing tips and tricks. And if you want to get into it, but you're finding it frustrating, lean on the community a little bit. I don't think you should have to. I think that's a failing of the game, but those resources are available. So use them if you got them, and play with friends and see if you can have some fun with it before, dropping the final axe on it. I want to try PvP. Hopefully I can organize something either with you or maybe some members of this community or my own and see what we can come up with there. But I will reserve any kind of final judgment before I've played like all forms. Like I haven't tried the Legends and Myths part, and I haven't tried PvP yet. But right now, I think if I move forward with a campaign, if I look at my experience, I will have more fun if I play with friends.
Yeah, definitely. I think all aspects of this game can be fun played with friends. And going back to the Game Pass thing, like this really feels like one of those games that, much like WoW or Sea of Thieves is a really great example, it's going to be one of those games that maybe 6 months down the line, a bunch of your friends will be like, hey, we're getting back into Minecraft Legends. You want in? And you'll play maybe the campaign, you'll play a bunch of PvP if the scene is still active, and you'll just like have a blast with it for maybe a month and a half. And then you'll put it down and go back to whatever else you were playing, right? Like it's the same sort of nostalgia factor that gets people back into playing classic WoW when they re-release that and stuff like that. I think there's room for this game in that kind of get together with a bunch of buddies and steamroll through the whole campaign. I think there's room for that, and maybe that's the space this game will occupy in our whole video gaming culture in a few months' time. But for now, we'd really love to hear from anybody else who's playing Minecraft Legends. We were hoping to fit a couple of emails about Minecraft Legends into this show, but we hadn't received any, maybe still too early days. If people want to write into the show, let us know what your experience is so far. Please do. We'd love to hear you in the usual email inbox. For now, that's going to be it for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any level will get you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, which does have a dedicated Dungeons and Legends channel for anybody interested in discussing Minecraft's spin-off games. You can also participate in the live show recording. We record this live with an audience in Discord every week, and we also have a monthly Minecraft audio hangout where people can drop in, let us know what they've been building in Minecraft this month, and share screenshots of their favorite builds. We currently have 321 patrons, which is down one from last week, but there's always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineers, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz, for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance and let them know that they can listen to The Spawn Chunks on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube. Be sure to leave a rating and a review on your favorite platform, maybe even a comment on the YouTube channel. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com. And the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where these castle building videos should be popping up on Empire's SMP sooner or later, and I will be returning to the Minecraft Survival Guide Season 2 once 1.20 arrives. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where you can see me doing the little bits and pieces of castle building that'll end up in the time lapses on YouTube. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online is linked at joelduggan.com. You can find my other podcast, The Citadel Cafe, about sci-fi and entertainment. You can find my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment there as well. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media, as well as Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream every day but Monday. Lego Fridays, Minecraft the rest of the time, and very important note, this Friday coming is going to be a Lego unboxing. I have received a number of birthday presents from a very generous community, and I'll be revealing what they are because I have no idea live on stream on Friday. And so check that out. The rest of the time we'll be working on West Hill on the Citadel.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and some legends deserve to be retold.